Hello, my name is Julie Tremblay, and I would like to invite you inside of my studio in Newburgh, New York. My studio is inside the Regalbag building, a historical building that was built in 1840 and that saw many incarnations over the years. First it was built as a cotton mill, then it was a lawnmower factory, and actually was the largest lawnmower factory in the world for some time. And then it was a purse, bag, wallet factory, hence the name Regalbag Building. Regalbag was the name of the company. The site of the building is truly exceptional. It is sandwiched in between a commercial train and the Hudson River. Truly a blessing to be here. So here we are. Welcome in. I will conduct this studio visit like any other studio visit by first apologizing for the mess. So here in my studio there are all kinds of things. There are finished pieces. There are pieces that have been exhibited. There are works in progress. There are some experiments that I don't know whether they're any good or not. But to me, they all ask questions that I think are of interest. The question is whether or not those questions are of interest to anyone else. So when I decide that a piece is good enough to be shown, it's because I feel that maybe other people can find those questions, the questions that the works raise, of interest. The light that comes in here is truly magnificent, and I think in the last few years I have been taking advantage of the exceptional light that comes in by using more and more reflective materials. As my work is a reflection of my interest in natural phenomena, I have been spending a considerable amount of time thinking and looking about the Hudson River School painters. Now, of course, when you look at my work, maybe that's not what would first come to mind as a reference. But of course, as I was mentioning before, with the quality of the light that we have here in the Hudson Valley, I started understanding the fascination that the Hudson River School painters had. And I have been fantasizing about the idea of a new kind of Hudson River School artists that are equally fascinated by the light and the landscape that we have, and making work that is influenced by it, but work that looks very, very, very different from those of those painters. My works always start with a fascination for a material that I stumble upon, a material that I am seduced by, even though sometimes those materials, too many people at first might not be, they might not think of them as seductive, such as this rusty chain link fence that I got from the backyard of a building that I restored in Newburgh. This piece here is largely unresolved and is a work in progress. I have been combining materials that don't belong together. And this is something that interests me. What are the things that belong together and that don't belong together? What are the forms that belong together or don't belong together? What are the ideas that belong together or don't belong together? I've been thinking a lot about good ideas and bad ideas, and what the difference is between a good idea and a bad idea, and what makes a good idea good and what makes a bad idea bad. It's almost 15 years since I started using different types of metal mesh. What has attracted me to metal mesh is how, unlike in traditional sculpture, the space is not confined to the exterior of the sculpture, but continued inside. This type of mesh here was sent to me by a company from China. They sent me an email asking whether I could be interested in their material, so I said, yeah, sure, send me some. So it's actually used for air filtration system, but I really like the material, and I like what color is doing to it. There are a few things I like more than when people ask me, hey, would you be interested in playing around with this material? I'm like, duh, yeah. This is a combination of two different types of PVC. One, the silvery one is a mylar, and then I combined it with some holographic film. And the combination of the holographic film being reflected in the mylar works quite well, in my opinion. This is another PVC piece. I don't know if you can see, but I put a light bulb inside this one. I think that these would make some lovely art lamps. I love piles of stuff. Sometimes stuff piling up in my studio end up being an inspiration for a piece. This is two other pieces made from that mesh that was sent to me from China. I come from Quebec, Canada. I grew up in a family that were quite involved with materials, actually. My mom was working in fur, and my dad was working in commercial glass and aluminum. So I think that this exposure to these materials has had an influence on me as a sculptor. And also my Catholic upbringing, where things were not allowed to be said and emotions were not allowed to be expressed, and messes were not supposed to be to exist. It has had also a deep influence on me, and I think that my work's explosive qualities and the messes in my work definitely comes from there. For the purpose of this virtual studio visit, I have decided to crowdsource some questions. So here they are. What materials drive you the most and why? Well, as I mentioned before, I consider myself a materialist, so choosing one material or two materials or even three materials that drive me the most is virtually impossible. But all of them, I find some sort of sensuality in them. And the more unlikely the sensuality is, then the more interested I am in them, like rusty chain link fence. You wouldn't think if you stumbled upon some rusty chain link fence, you wouldn't think of it as being sensual. But once I start manipulating the materials, if I see that I can get some sensuality out of them, then that interests me. Second question is, how do you develop the form of your sculptures? Um, well, when there is an industrial material that makes its way into my studio, I first pick it up and I manipulate it to see what I can get out of it. And it's really a conversation between the material and I. And as I am making a piece, I find that that conversation becomes more and more one way, and that there is more and more listening involved in terms of me listening to what the piece is telling me. It's telling me where it wants to go. It kind of develops its own identity as I am making it, and I feel that at some point I'm just responsible for revealing the identity that the piece has, and just let it do the talking. Third question. Colors, absence of color, neutral tones. How do you describe your color range? When I choose a material, it's because that the material has some inherent qualities that I am seduced by. And of course, I want those qualities to shine through in the work. But also, I want to push the material. I want it to transform. I want it to transcend itself. So there's a fine line of how much transformation I want to occur, and how much I want the viewer to identify the material. When I choose a material like rusty chain link fence, I think it's important in the work that it is recognized as such. But with other materials, I might want them to transcend themselves some more. If, for example, if I work with chicken wire, then maybe I don't want it to be recognized as such right away. So this is when I might be using more color, so that the material transforms more, or it could just be that I use the material sort of as just for its form-making capabilities, and how it transforms when I use color on it. So, and in terms of how I choose my colors, well, I like vibrant colors, and I like my work to seduce. And the fourth question, do you have an emotion that drives your creative process? Which one? Well, I listen to a lot of music, and I hope that my sculptures have a musical quality to them. I'm definitely a romantic, and I think that a great romantic musical piece always has a range of emotion. It's not just one emotion. So I would say that the same thing applies to my work. And then, of course, there's always what the viewer brings into the work, the baggage that they bring into the work. So it's the emotional quality of a work is, of course, very subjective, and is not something that I can control. But I like the agony and the ecstasy of making monumental scale works. And I think that some of this agony and ecstasy finds itself in the work. And there's definitely on one end there's awe and there's also tragedy. I'm always trying to get to some kind of terrifying beauty. This is it for the questions, and this is also it for this studio visit. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And there is just one more thing I'd like to share with you, and it is my favorite object in my studio, and it wasn't made by me. It's an 1984 Bang & Olufsen turntable with a tangential arm. Isn't it a beauty? So I hope you have enjoyed this visit, and I hope to see you at an opening somewhere in the near future.